Welcome back to another episode of the Vialle MX post-race show where we just had another winner in 450 Supercross and another winner in 250 Supercross. 2025 continues to deliver and there is so much for us to get into on this episode of the Vialle MX post-race show. But before we go any further, thank you to Decal Works, Fox Racing, Yoshimura, Yamaha Motor USA, MotorX, for all of their support of the Vialle MX post-race show. A really healthy list there of top quality brands that truly deliver a lot to this industry. I'm your host, Lewis Phillips, as per usual, joined by Michael Lindsay. Hello, how are you?
I'm here.
Okay, I guess that's all we can ask.
I slept in a rental car for an hour last night. I'm not exactly the most lively person on the face of the earth.
Well, that's probably not the smartest thing to do, to be honest. Park benches are probably better.
Actually, I slept on an airport bench the week before after I was done with the photos. The front seat in my Mazda C30 or wherever the hell it was called this week was actually quite comfortable in a reclined flat.
Well, hopefully you've realised how lucky you are, because some people live like that. So your hour is nothing compared to some people. So
thank you for that moment of reflection, Lewis.
Yep, that's what I'm here for. So we finally had Ken Roczen win a main event. I would like to say that it was inevitable and it was always going to happen, but I certainly feel as though doubt had started to creep in. And prior to Cooper Webb stalling it in the main event, I feel like doubt was once again starting to creep into everyone's minds. But
I say that... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, let's just go with this. What does this mean? Is this just a feel-good story? Roczen got a win? Is this the catalyst for something more championship-wise? Will there be a lot more of this to come? Or do we just go, good job, Kenny, and move on?
I'm torn. I'm very torn. On the one side, we've talked about this the last couple of weeks, the crap that runs through my head while I'm walking around shooting, like kind of that back off that heel of that Anderson conversation we had weeks ago, looking at Webb, stalking him. At one point in the race, I was like, great. Next conversation point's going to be the missed opportunity for Ken. How many missed opportunities can you find this year? But he did pull it off. Absolutely one of the cooler, like, emotional wins. You know, in our sport, I don't feel like a lot of individual venues mean a lot. Daytona, of course, means a massive amount to NASCAR drivers, but it does seem like it matters a bit to the riders. Like, Kenny was genuinely stoked to win it after, trying for over 10 years, basically, at this point. What it means for the championship, I mean, it brings him in closer. It kind of goes off of, me and you had this conversation, you'd gone back off his prior stats, because is it about round 8 or 9 that's kind of the telltale of where he's going to be in terms of the championship in the long run?
Well, I don't know if you can dive in that much, but traditionally, round 8 is not good. I mean, at this point, he has done 11 round 8s. Well, sorry, he was injured for 2 of them, so I guess that's actually 10. No, he's done 10 round 8s, and he has been on the podium just 3 times. So
I do feel like Kenny is one of the, okay, take the people that haven't won at this point. Anderson, AP, like a Barsha, Kenny, people that we all knew Kenny would eventually get one, but label the guys that we've kind of said, hey, could win this season. Outside of Kenny, any of them win, kind of like Malcolm's win. It doesn't really change the trajectory of their season. I wouldn't say, like, maybe some little bit better results in back end, but it doesn't make them a week in and week out podium threat and winner. Kenny is one, though, that you got to think that confidence, the way he operates, the feelings like this could propel him to, I wouldn't say, just start pulling wins in and week out, but to maybe bridge that gap a little more consistently to like Webb and Sexton, who we kind of have as the perennial front runners at this point. So I'm not just jumping up and down going, yeah, Kenny's in like deep in this championship hunt now, but I also don't know how you can argue that he's not in it more than he was in Daytona, and there isn't a little bit more of a pathway for him at this point.
My counter to that would be, yes, it could be a catalyst, but ever since he's been on the Suzuki, he's had 1 win per season. So actually, we have evidence to say that this does not lead to anything more. Now, of course, this could be different. This probably will be different. But that would be my counter to the obvious narrative of where will Ken Roczen take this next. Obviously, we hope that he gets in this championship fight, but there is evidence that suggests maybe this could be his only win.
No, I think the one, of course, I mean, the reason we go racing is we always have to wait and see what happens. But as this year, as we'll get into it through the rest of the 450 and even the 250 class talk, it's just, I throw stats, throw trends out the window. Nothing makes sense anymore. Anything can happen at any given point to Webb or Sexton throughout this. But I don't know. It's just interesting, like I mentioned before, just seeing between Larry and Dustin and Kenny's comments, just I feel like there's more belief in that operation, that they're in this. There's more of a feeling that they think they can hang in this in the long run. I am curious, of course, that Kenny's timing to win this race. What's out there for competition, like if he actually can do a full pull this year and be in it to the end. Because as we talk about, I think when you think of the championship between Sexton and Webb, we think of it as coming down to the wire. Can Kenny now be a part of that conversation and go down to the last couple rounds, not just mathematically, and I'm not saying like 15 points out, but can he go down to the wire the last 2 rounds and be 8 points out or something like that? Can he be within that conversation?
Fun little stat is the fact that now with Suzuki, we have 5 manufacturers that have won Premier Class main events this season. 5 in 8. That's quite impressive. And that matches the all-time record. We've never had more than 5. 5 has happened in 1977, 2020, and 2023. Obviously, more happened more recently thanks to the Pierre Mobility Group having Husqvarna and Gas in play. But hey, we hit an all-time record at the weekend, so that's truly something to celebrate. Also something to celebrate, Fox Racing just won a 450 Supercross main event. With a rich heritage and deep racing DNA, Fox Racing has been at the forefront of motocross for 50 years. They empower the world's best athletes like Jorge Prado, Ken Roczen, Levi Kitchen and Joe Shimoda to chase their dreams. With their gear, dreamers become champions. They honor the past while inventing tomorrow, pushing the limits of racewear and protection. Because at Fox, change is the only constant. Shop their new Elevated Future limited edition collection by visiting foxracing.com. Thank you to Fox Racing for their support of the Vital MX post-race show. Now, I've heard a lot of references to Tampa. Oh, this is great for Kenny, but just imagine if Tampa hadn't have happened. Well, he's only 16 points down. 16, in my mind at least, isn't exceptionally large. Now, okay, admittedly, when you look at who's ahead of him, is Cooper Webb going to open a door for him to gain 8 points in one weekend? Probably not. So that makes the 16 points seem larger than it maybe is on paper. But I'm not especially negative about the 16-point gap. I certainly feel like there are people out there who are more negative.
No, I mean, again, I hate to play the card that anything can happen, but again, if you look at that round, Kenny's won at Tampa, like, okay, you'd have to at least think he was going to come home that night with somewhere around 18, 17, or 16 points. So technically, we could be talking about Kenny as the points leader right now. It can happen anywhere at any time. We continue to see the small moments from Chase that easily could turn into something bigger if luck just doesn't go his way with the way the crash happens or the incident. And yeah, same thing with Webb at any point. It's not that far out, especially again when it feels like when you start talking about these guys, so where we've had the field thin down a little bit on the championship contenders. When I think of talking about, okay, if coming into the season, you told me that we would be talking about Roczen, Webb, and Chase for the championship and that all these guys would go out, I feel like this would be a round 14 conversation. You know what I mean? Round 13. I mean, we're still only at round 8. We haven't even we're just about to cross the halfway point, basically. So it's not that big of a deal. What's the old Carmichael's old saying? The
season starts at Daytona.
Even though Daytona is like 2 rounds earlier than it used to technically be from his day. I think it was usually around 9 or 10. Yeah, it's like I said, I don't know what to say. Like, I'm not trying to dismiss it, but like, let's just talk about Kenny in general. Give me your thoughts on the actual ride at Daytona. Again, looking at Webb space, looking at Chase space. Like when you saw up front, again, Kenny's got that urgency, great early race urgency. Did you think it was his once he took a hold lead, or did you feel like you were just waiting for the countdown of Chase or Webb to get to him, or did you feel confident in his ride?
No, I felt it was Webb's up until Webb stalled it, because Webb was steaming towards him and looked brilliant. Now, Roczen looked brilliant as well, but Webb appeared to have an edge. Obviously, that wasn't there early in the main event, and I think it's important to note that Roczen did pass Webb because Webb was chasing Roczen down. The same old narrative is being played out about Webb almost got Roczen at the end, but the fact that Roczen was the one who passed Webb first makes this a different situation than what we've come to know. I think it's important to just note that because it gives Kenny a little more credit. But on Kenny, Indianapolis is going to be insanely important for Kenny. He won there 2 years ago. Last year, he almost won there, chased Jet Lawrence down across the Triple Crown, arguably one of his better rides in the season. You could almost argue that his Indianapolis ride was better than Glendale. So Indianapolis works for Kenny. Now add in the momentum from this win, combine that with the momentum of just being in Indianapolis. Kenny should capitalize next weekend, and he should add another win. So if it's a substandard weekend next time around, then that bursts the balloon in my eyes. But if he can win again, which I do think that it's set up for him too, considering history, then yeah, we've got a championship, I guess.
When was the last time Kenny won 2 back-to-back races in Supercross?
It would have been 2020, I'd imagine.
2020, or I was going to go all the way back to 17, 2 rounds before he did the arm.
Hold on. No, it would have. He won. He swept the Triple Crown in Indianapolis not the Triple Crown, sorry, the Triple Header in 2021. That was, and yeah, that was the last time he won consecutive races. So yeah, that just leans into my point more. Indianapolis, great venue for Kenny. So I would imagine that his confidence will be at an all-time high when we touch down in Indianapolis. So it will be very interesting to see how he uses that. And then if he can build on that, where does that momentum go? Because at that point, it's quite substantial.
So similar conversation that me and you had, with Kenny that we had with about Cooper Webb a couple weeks ago was kind of like, what does it actually take for Webb to win the championship? Because a lot of people would label Webb as he'll get lucky, it'll come to him. But as we discussed, his 2 championship years, he actually won out nearly half the season. Like, he has a very impressive win totals in the years that he races for the title. Take Kenny's situation right now against Chase and Webb. Do you look at, based on Kenny's current form and the way it's trending, do you think he can just win out to win the championship? Or with that little bit of points gap, are you leaning on it's going to take, I hate to say the word luck, but some external situation to keep him in there? Or do you think he will just, he can make that happen on his own, which do you lean towards?
I think Kenny needs a little bit of both. I don't believe that Kenny can just leapfrog a 16-point deficit to Cooper Webb. Obviously, Chase is now right there within touching distance. He could pass Chase potentially this weekend. So that's certainly doable. That's almost not a concern for Kenny. But I would say Webb, if I really break it down, I would say that Roczen could overcome 8 of the points by himself and would need help for the other 8 points. Really split it 50-50 between help and whatever you'd label him doing it himself, forthcoming nature. But speaking of Webb, yes, he didn't win, but in my mind, this was as good as a win. He was pissed after the race because he wanted to win, but there's no reason to doubt where he's at. There's no reason to doubt whether the magic from Arlington and Detroit is still there. This is still a brilliant version of Cooper Webb, and yeah, no notes other than nothing's changed in my mind from Arlington, other than naturally you have to give him more stock and more belief and more attention because his points lead has now doubled.
Yeah. I think the one thing I have to say on Webb is just watching him, particularly at Daytona. We've talked about it a little bit this year, him being back on the Yamaha, more aggressive, watching him. Yeah, eventually everybody kind of went to jumping loops, but actually, again, Coop usually being somebody who does it early, he sticked with blitzing super late. He looked really good in some of the roughest places on the track, really consistent in the rhythm sections, but just more aggressive overall. Just a little bit different Webb to watch. Very, very interesting to watch him around the track overall. See how his bike's working the whole 9 yards. Like he was clicking super well. Particularly as usual, any of the corners, they're super rutted. Watching him cut down and be able to kind of consistently nail stuff. I think Roczen was better after the finish, kind of in the open, more fast section, but Webb seemed to be much stronger on the back half of the track.
It was funny. Roczen was tripling into that off camber brilliantly. It was so beautiful to watch. And then Webb tried it a couple of laps after Kenny kind of used that to gain advantage on Webb. Tried it, botched it, and then kind of forgot about it for a little bit. I don't know, that sticks out as a Cooper Webb memory from Daytona.
The photo shooting it looks so cool, the way Kenny would land into it. I know Aaron and a couple guys picked up on it, but the toughest one, the jumping into the corner looks impressive. I thought coming out of it was what was gnarlier, and that's what Kenny mentioned in the press conference when I asked him, is how bad, you're on lean angle coming out, it would hook and want to kick you back out on the straightaway. And Kenny could just manipulate just right to carry the momentum out on the straightaway. Like when I saw Aaron use it to try to get around Anderson, I still think he made the pass next corner, but he caught the hook coming off and swapped and kind of didn't have that same drive. And one or two other guys I saw try to take Kenny's line, couldn't get the exit part of the corner back onto the straight actually super clean.
It's funny, actually. AP did pick up on it, but the lap he picked up on it was when Webb went inside and passed him.
It just glitched.
Why? I didn't get a glitch. What did you experience?
You were just blank for a while, and then all of a sudden I got some audio. All good.
I don't know what we do with this then.
That's fine.
Okay.
So tell me about your ship that's taking on water.
Well, the PR quote said ran out of steam at the end, and for some reason it didn't actually dawn on me until I read that like, I'd imagine he probably was quite beat up from that heat race crash, and that must have finally taken its toll on him at the end. But the heat race crash, honestly, brilliant start, which is not common for Chase, so that was a big box ticked, I felt. And then I looked away, and then that happens. There's no reason for that to happen. I guess that if I remember right, Chase went over the table, right, in that first rhythm section?
I believe so, and then he clipped. Was it he tried to go
the triple? Yes.
Yeah.
So I haven't spoken to Chase, but
tossed him forward.
I know that other riders contemplated tripling or going over the tabletop in the first rhythm section because it is faster, but said with track prep on the next triple, you're kind of jumping into essentially a blind transition because you don't know how soft it's going to be. You don't know how much pop you're going to need to get over the triple. Like it's essentially unsafe on lap one. So just going on the table and kind of a slow but steady way through the first rhythm is the way to go. And I believe Chase and Nate Thrasher in his heat race both attempted the over the table and both kind of ended up in the same situation. So just a little thing that I picked up on that I thought was quite interesting. Obviously, the soil in Daytona is unpredictable once prepped because it's essentially like going to a sand track. You get ruts, you prep it, but the ruts are still there. They're just underneath. It's just like it's soft.
Yeah.
You just don't know how soft it is.
I'd say particularly like if for anybody that's never been there, you walk it. It's like 5 different soils around the track. You have to really second guess what rhythm lane is going to do what, even though they kind of blend together in your head. They definitely do not react the same across the track.
I feel like we're going back towards the different soil types more at this point. Like, we actually had a legitimate grass area this year, which I feel like that's been missing for some time. I feel like we're going back.
Yeah.
Slowly.
We had definitely the dark soil. We had the grass sections. We had the beach sand. We had the bit of like kind of a light red clay DG on one part of the track. More of a DG on one side of the track and then a kind of a clay on the other side. So yeah, we had a little bit of everything. Kind of did give me a little bit more old school Daytona vibes. It is funny though how jumpy it is right now. Still, I know I think Ricky said he took something like 14 or 15.
Yeah, 15 less jumps.
It did not seem like it watching it. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just shocking how busy that track was.
I mean, without the data and without actually knowing, I would imagine the 15 less jumps came from the fact that I felt like the track was, well, I mean, I guess you could look at lap times to confirm this, but I felt like the track was shorter this year, as in less short straights, turn, blah, blah, blah. Like the section on the left of the start straight was essentially just 2 long straights, whereas there would have been a lot more switchbacks in years gone by, therefore more room for just stupid double, single, etc. So I'd imagine that's where the number of jumps came down. But yeah, back to Chase. Well, I'm already proven wrong because I said last week that either side of Webb or Chase, I felt like the rest of the season, the points gap wouldn't go higher than 7 and it would just continue to flip-flop either way. We're now at 10. So that theory has gone out the window. And yeah, honestly, we did this last week about ranking the differences between Tampa, Detroit, Arlington. In my mind, Daytona is more concerning than even Arlington, which I feel like is a very rare, odd take compared to the general consensus. But Arlington, like the way that I mark concern is Arlington, you go, well, he crashed because he was pushing for the win. Whereas Daytona, you're like, well, that shouldn't have happened. Like, what's the justification for that one? And that makes it more concerning in my mind. And I'd imagine for him as well, because you've got to answer questions to yourself, don't you? So when you ask yourself, well, why did that happen? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe this track prep shouldn't have gone over the tabletop situation. But yeah, I mark Daytona as more concerning than Arlington.
Well, I would think one of the things you'd run into if you're him, like, do you get to the point you start just second guessing yourself all the time? Like, you could easily get yourself in a situation you're second guessing yourself, because if you look at the situations and if you fall towards the narrative of like, hey, this is not great decision making, at what point do you start over analyzing things, start over guessing things instead of trusting your natural instinct? But in the same breath, if your natural instinct keeps leading you to what could be considered poor decisions, you could just ping pong back and forth on, basically what the heck am I supposed to do? And I felt for Chase on that one, especially just like they caught him on the feed. Just, it's a heat race. Usually a rider of his caliber that goes down a heat race and just knows it's pointless. They go back to the truck, they go maybe swap some gear because they've slid out or something. But to see him kind of sitting off the back of the truck on the feed, just like, again, I'm just wondering, like, man, what's running through his head? Like, is he second guessing these decisions at all? And if so, that's got to be tough to go line up again when you're that caliber of guy and you know that, well, what I'm capable of doing is being the best in the world. But do I start changing things or not?
I guess the answer to that is you would think so, but then the counter to that is, I guess, as an athlete in any sport, you've got to have an ability to eliminate that, because otherwise you will never be at the top of your sport. So I'd imagine that, okay, right now, Chase to a more so, but I would imagine that like Webb, Roczen, all of those guys at some point deal with that and have to put it to the back of their mind. And I guess also the positive or the justification that won't happen is early in the main event, he was riding really well and fast. So that proved that the heat race crash was put in the rearview mirror for a second. And then I guess, he ran out of steam towards the end. But also, in the first time session, he was two or so seconds quicker than anyone, which means that Arlington wasn't lingering in his mind, and holding him back.
I think Chase has always proven that, not to be rude. You go back to the Honda era and the highlight crash reel, how many times he'd get up and go be number one qualifier the next week, number one qualifier the next session, just dominate a heat race, dominate the early part of a main. I think we all agree, like, the ability for Chase to maybe put those things out of mind and just reset and go for it does not seem to be a problem. I think the classic comment, and I know it seems like you're just beating a dead horse at this point, is the decision-making process that gets to the point that we're even having these conversations. Because that's where it's like, it's like, thing that's not going to change is Chase showing up next week and giving his best and potentially being the best guy on the track. Like, I would be more shocked if we show up at a race and he's mentally affected and, qualifying 8th and just not pushing. Like, that would beyond shock me. What, I hate to say it, what is be more shocking to me is him not just making errors like that.
I think the most prominent stat regarding Chase now is, okay, he hasn't won since Glendale, but he actually hasn't been in the top 2 since Glendale. Which, I mean, riders don't win. Like, that's not that shocking, but not in the top 2 since Glendale is a surprise.
Well, it's a trending thing when you think of, again, the field, and it's not to bash on their guys, but when you think of, okay, this should be Sexton and Webb going head to head, you should be thinking, no matter what, Sexton should be second on a bad night. And it's out saying, championships are won on your worst night. Not following up on that is a little more concerning, especially if it continues to trend, because that's what's going to allow Webb to build this gap. That's what's going to allow Roczen to oversee him in the point standings.
Well, I guess the positive there with Chase is you could say that, or the positive side of it, whatever you want to label it as, is, yeah, that was my worst night. I could have very easily not raced or whatever, because, I mean, I don't know if you want to buy into that or not, but I guess there's that justification for Daytona, whereas there isn't that justification for Arlington or, well, I guess Detroit, you could say, like, yeah, Detroit, I don't know. Who knows? I would, similar to what we said last week, different to Roczen, Chase does have the ability to just win, and claw back points. Whereas I don't think that we believe that Roczen has that raw ability or pace. And it's only 10 points, which isn't the end of the world. For some reason, in my mind, with no statistical knowledge, in my mind, 13 is completely fine. 14, we've got problems. I don't know why. For some reason, 14 points sounds like a massive gap to me, but 13 sounds really close and fine.
I got one for you. Barring a bike problem, do you foresee Webb even finishing off the podium the rest of this championship?
I want to say no, but then I also want to say it could have very easily happened this weekend. At one point, I kind of did feel like it was on the cards with Chase charging forward and AP riding well and Anderson in the mix. So, very, 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 very unlikely, but I guess possible. But very, very, very unlikely.
See, I'm a little bit upset. I have a feeling I can see him being on the podium every single round, just being able to claw. That's, to me, again.
When I said very, very unlikely, I meant very, very unlikely that he won't.
Like he finished off. Oh, okay. So we're on the same. Yeah. No, because I kind of picture that's gonna be the toughest part of getting those points back. Is yes, Chase can go out and win week in, week out, but man, I just think Webb. We always talk about Webb has the ability to will himself to do things. I just see him willing himself. Bad night, good night, a stall, a slide out, anything. I think he can get there round after round.
We briefly touched on AP, but a great comeback for him after a very difficult season. It will be interesting to see if this is Daytona specific, because good or bad, depending on what side each respective rider falls on after the weekend, you can either forget about your bad result and say it was just Daytona, or you can question your good result by saying, oh, it was Daytona, I wonder if I can continue this. So that'll be interesting to see where AP is at when we get to Indianapolis, but he immediately, from the start of the day, just looked better.
Yeah. Which I laugh completely blows a hole in the wire of what I was been saying the last few weeks is I thought it was, I didn't expect it to just be a 1 week big jump. I thought it was going to be a crawl through the remainder of the season to get back to a podium. I mean, again, I said it can still happen at any time, but it did, even though he gets along with Daytona, I get the vibe thing. I was still shocked to see him make that big of a jump in 1 week. And he just kept, it's funny, he mentioned the press conference stuff, and I know he's mentioned it multiple times this year, but he keeps referencing being sick, having been sick. I think initially at the beginning of the year, everybody had joking that death flu that was gnarly, but the more I hear him say it, I keep wondering, like, okay, is it something a little further? Like, do we have something a little bit more of an illness issue than just the standard everybody got the flu in late December?
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll never know. But one interesting question that I think looms now is, yes, of course, the race for the championship is very good and very exciting, but quietly, the race for fourth or next best or best of the rest or whatever you want to call it is actually really good. Jason Anderson, 125. Malcolm Stewart, 124. Justin Cooper, 122. Justin Barsha, 111. AP's not out of that, but is quite a way adrift because of his terrible start to the year. But yeah, the battle for next best guy is wide open. And I'm about to blow your mind with who I'm going to pick. In fact, have a guess at who I'm going to pick.
For fourth in the championship?
No, not fourth in the championship. Just now, the next best guy.
The next best guy behind the top three.
Yep.
You're going to say after starting the year, like I would say about 4 weeks ago, actually your comment was, reading off Justin Cooper's Instagram post to me, was 3 great races in a row. And you were like, oh, progress. Okay. You are now picking Justin Cooper.
Oh, well, that's not as fun as I was expecting. Yes, I am. Because
I remembered what you said, so I know you're doubling. Not I want to say doubling back, but you are correcting your earlier tense.
no, I'm not correcting anything. He was terrible to start the year. It was awful. It wasn't good at all.
But after he had 3 of the races, or one of the results we're talking about in this last 3 was one of the ones he referenced in that Instagram post where you're like, meh.
No. To be honest, it's only this feeling comes from Arlington and Daytona alone. Nothing before that really does anything for me. But Arlington was obviously great, and Daytona quietly, I don't think anyone would really notice this because I'd imagine it wasn't prominent on TV, but he was following Chase through early when Chase was like charging, and with no problem. Like Chase got Malcolm, Jacob got Malcolm. And not only that, but in the interim where Chase would get Malcolm and move away while Jacob was dealing with Malcolm, Jacob would then absorb that deficit. So quietly, the one that no one will talk about, one of the best rides in Daytona in my mind, was Justin Cooper. And he said, I think he said he was 10th on lap 1, but also he said, which is very confusing, that 250 or 450, he cannot start in Daytona. And he gets wheel spin, and it's consistent on 250s and 450s, and he doesn't know why. So that's weird, because Justin Cooper is one of the best starters in the sport. Or maybe the best? No. Maybe? No. You can't say that, can you? Justin Cooper's the best starter in the sport? He's in the top 5, I think.
Yeah, without Jet Lawrence around, I would say. I mean,
is Justin Cooper not a better starter than Jet Lawrence?
No. Think of Jet last year. Jesus Christ.
Well, we're not just picking one year. This year, Jet was not very good at the starts. I'm talking life.
Yeah, career-wise. I mean, Jacob's up there. Let's see. What would be your top 5? Of course, Prado.
Oh, Prado. Yeah, I forgot about him.
Sport as a whole.
Yeah, Prado. Prado's injured, so like, forget he even exists at this point. Yeah, Prado.
Wow, that was quick. You forgot about your guy that quickly. Wow.
Ignore
your guy. Your man.
But yeah, no, Justin Cooper. No one will talk about that. What everyone will talk about, and we will try, but I have no idea why it happened, is Jason Anderson's fall from grace, because this isn't great. And what's making it worse is consistently he is running up front, which makes the fall off even more evident. If he was just starting 9th and finishing 8th, it wouldn't be that noteworthy. But for a moment, it looked like Jason Anderson could win the race. So how did we end up with this result?
Let's put it this way. Roczen, Plessinger, and Webb walk into the press room to sit down, and live mic on their lap. You can overhear them a little too much. They're looking at the screen, and every single one of them was mind blown that Anderson had fallen that far back.
Yeah, I watched the press conference back. I feel like maybe need to do something about just leaving like 2 minutes of live mic, especially in the YouTube video. It was a bit uncomfortable. I was cringing, like listening to them, like I shouldn't be hearing this.
Plessinger said something about being pissed at Hill. I wasn't sure what that was about.
No. I think he said he basically said he's getting on his nerves, as in he's so good. Like, AP will believe that he should be handling Justin Hill, but he's giving him fits. Kind of vibe is what I got from that.
I had just walked in. I was like, I didn't catch the beginning tense, but I did watch all of them. Kind of look at. They were like shocked how far Anderson had fallen back. So I mean, that's a fan standpoint, a media standpoint, his competition standpoint are all asking the same question: what the heck is going on?
It just adds fuel to the fire of what he does next year, and what adds more fuel to that fire is Levi Kitchen, one of the riders I would have pegged as a possible legitimate replacement, is now maybe in need of more 250 time. So I will be very, very, very interested to see what Kawasaki do with Jason Anderson. And whatever they do for 2026, I will want some justification for it to understand the decision.
Well, me and you had this conversation this last week, and I know the one that we were talking about is it would be very interesting to see Justin Cooper there, because if you're him in the star situation, he's on a 1-year contract. This year, his verbiage in his contract has like no performance clause. Like last year, it was well known that if he hit certain targets, he got an auto re-up. I checked with his management. He has no such verbiage this year. I mean, he could go win a bunch of races, and it's not guaranteed he'll get re-upped. Yes, you have Eli that's looming on retirement. He'll end up doing another Supercross only year or 2. But with Deegan coming up soon and another long-term commitment to Webb picked up his option. I think he's already talking about staying further. if you're J Coop, that doesn't seem like a long-term environment for you. You're not really their investment at this point. They've given you a chance, which is awesome, but Cowie, there could be an opportunity there. And if you're Cowie, like, okay, on one hand, you could say, looking at these results right now, and based on trending right now, yes, Justin Cooper's a better pick. Or you could argue, maybe they would finish similar. But at least with Cooper, you're trying something different. Anderson, they've kind of done it for a while, and it's not improving overall. So maybe it's, they've got their long-term commitment with Prado's or a guy, at least with Kitchen's injury. You look at like, okay, he probably do another 2 years at 250s likely. They could take a swing at J Coop, and I would be very, very interested in that.
Jumping down the list a little bit, do you know what happened to Justin Barsha?
No, I actually don't. At one point I looked up and I was very lost at where he was and why.
I know he crashed in the chase incident in the heat race, which obviously gave him a bad gate pick. I'm just reading now, the Gas PR just says that he had a mid-pack start and finished 10th. So not much to that at all. Funny to me that last week we specifically used Mitchell Oldenburg as a benchmark for where Cody Schock would be. We literally said the words, does he beat Mitchell Oldenburg? And he didn't do that. But that proved to be a very well thought out benchmark because that was right where he ended up. Mitchell Oldenburg 13th and Cody Schock 14th. But honestly, Cody was messy in qualifying. And
highlight reel days, back to my time with him. So great.
I then kind of forgot about him because of that, because I kind of wrote him off a little bit. And then it wasn't until the main event started that I was like, oh, he made the main. And then delivered this.
What was he running, like fourth in his heat race?
I don't remember.
He had a great heat race. He started decent, but he passed, I think, two guys to get to fourth in his heat race. The problem was there was kind of a gap. I can't remember whose heat was. Top three guys had a little bit of a gap on him, but I think he got fourth in his heat. Or worse fit.
I would argue that that's okay. It's obviously not as glamorous an achievement as his podium, but I would argue it's within the same realm of like great work. So, impressive. And I wonder if that sparks any intent from any other 250 riders. Probably not, because most of them would have an ego and wouldn't accept a 14th place. I feel like anyone in the realm for wins, etc., is never going to accept that. But maybe people of Coty's level? Who knows?
I don't know. Fifth in his heat. And his heat was the one that Malcolm won, then Plessinger, Anderson, Webb. Cody was in fourth, had passed into fourth, and then Webb got him. But it was funny, on press day, I asked him actually what his goal was, and he said 15th. And I said, that's nice, just don't get lapped. And then his eyes got big, and he's like, I haven't been lapped in a while. That would suck. And luckily, he did stay ahead of being lapped. Although it's got to be odd going from being on the podium in 250 class 1 week to being in B practice the next week.
Before we move on to 250s, let's just do some quick housekeeping here, because I actually didn't mention Decal Works when we were talking about Chase.
Wow, you were so lost with your man.
Which is wild, to be honest. But never mind, because I'm here now to tell you that decalmx.com is your one-stop shop for customizable graphics. Whatever you want, they can do it. And not only that, but they will relish your challenge, your creativity, so that they can deliver you exactly what you want. Decalmx.com. There's a lot on that website. You could probably get lost on there for quite some time, I would imagine. So head there, see all that they have to offer. Of course, massive supporters of all that we do with post-race content on Vital MX, and also timely reference to Yamaha, because not only did Yamaha extend their lead in 450 Supercross with Cooper Webb to 10 points, Max Anstie continues to hold the red plate in 250 SX East. Hayden Deegan continues to hold the red plate in 250 SX West. Obviously, it would be quite dramatic if he lost it on a weekend off. And Maxime Renault now has the red plate in MXGP as well. So Yamaha are really coming up gold all around the world, and that's a testament to what Yamaha puts into the sport and what they have on offer for you, the weekend warrior. So make sure that you visit your local Yamaha dealer or wherever you want to get a dirt bike and figure out what Yamaha has to offer for you. Thank you to Yamaha as well for their support. New this year.
It's my freedom. It's my fix. It's the endless pursuit of trying to find that flow.
So 250s?
I got one to hit you with before 250s, just a subject. Daytona. Do you feel like, I know this has been brought up a lot of times and there's a lot of implications between they expanded pit row years ago. We lost a lot of the grass area, etc. But I mean, it's funny. I think about the track, like Aaron's performance there. It definitely strikes me because I just watch it anymore. I'm like, it's still cool. I personally know Daytona has its issues for some. I love it as an event. I just don't even hear as much about guys anymore. Like, it's been a trend forever, but man, nobody talks anymore about having to really chase suspension, really having to try to figure out how to make it more salvageable. I thought the track got chewed up, but in the same breath, I don't know. Most of the rhythms were chewed up. No, I didn't think the braking bump sections were really nasty by any means or anything like that. Just a lot of big, fast rhythms. Seems like it's just an overbuilt supercross track at this point.
I enjoyed Daytona much more this year versus last year.
Yes,
I felt like it was a much better Daytona.
Yeah. But that's where I get to, I hate to say it, is like I felt like this year probably leaned the most towards a normal supercross setup, and it was very enjoyable to watch. So it throws out the window. Do we toss out the old history side of it? It needs to be a bunch of deep ruts and a bunch of deep corners that needs to screw with the guys, or do you lean more towards the layout this year of like, yeah, just make it a little bit more supercrossy, toss the trying to make it like an outdoors track.
Yeah. No, I thought it was a good Daytona. And I enjoyed the track. I can't remember a Daytona track that I kind of looked at and admired the creativity. Yeah, I can't remember the last time that Daytona had that spark, that it used to have, like you're mentioning. So, yeah, well done to all involved. Great stuff. 250s.
250s.
Let's just start with the championship, I think, because that's kind of the crux here. So RJ took a ton of points out of Max. He's 14 down, but he's still fourth. Max leads 6 points over Tom Vialle, 13, I believe, over Chance Hymas. Kitchen is out, so he's now not in the frame for a championship. Who is a true East title contender? Obviously Max and obviously RJ. I think that's fair to say. I also say, obviously Vialle. And I also say, what I said at round one is really coming true. Like, it's actually quite scary. I have low-key Chance Hymas hype, but I also don't think that's going to materialize. But I do think that whatever does materialize will be a massive statement for what he's capable of in the future. Behind Hampshire, the only names that realistically I guess you could entertain are Thrasher or Hammaker, but on this occasion I don't want to do that. So rather boringly, I'm going for the top four as being legitimate contenders. What says you?
Oh, this one's tough. I said coming into this weekend, the press box 1 I will eat my own. Well, I won't say I'll eat my own words. I'm still just baffled by Tom's year so far. I don't see it being a successful title defense.
I don't know.
The problem is the Daytona thing. Like, where were we the last two races?
I don't know. He was right there. 5 and 4 is good.
The points are fine, but the riding was not great. I mean, this sounds like such a cop-out, but Levi said it. To be impressed. I asked him after his championship run with RJ last year. I said, what have you learned the most? What's the biggest lesson you're carrying into this season? And, he stated a couple I would consider obvious points. And then the one he had, of course, touched on was how badly he felt like he threw it away during the East-West shootouts last year. We're about to go into one pretty early into these championships. I don't, again, it's not that the West Coast is stacked. There's just a couple names in there that could throw a wrench in this. Max's night was just like, again, you win titles on your worst nights. Like, that was a really rough day overall for Max, and he still salvaged it so well. I just go with Max and RJ. I think Chance still, like, I mean, if he runs it through all the way in the title fight, I'm super impressed considering the whole 3 days basically on a bike going into it. There's kind of that feeling that, eventually he'll get a little bit caught out. What he's doing right now is still extremely impressive considering his situation, but I'm going to narrow it down to Max and RJ. I just think the experience will, it sounds so dumb. I'm saying the experience while I'm talking about them beating a guy holding the number 1 plate, but I don't know. I just see it being one of those two.
I will narrow it down then to Max, RJ, and Vialle. Honestly, everything I said after Tampa, it feels like it's playing out in real time. This, like Kitchen going out, RJ's already had his bad race, and therefore Vialle is 8 points up on him, which isn't an insignificant amount. Yeah. And then the craziness of the East-West showdown, tell me not that Vialle will get a great start and then just finish 4th. Like, I kind of could see that happening. So, we're also going to softer dirt now. I'm not going to say it, but there's a part of me that wants to say that Vialle is now my title favorite.
Oh, wow. That is a big pivot in 2 weeks.
Like, honestly, though, like, this is exactly why, call it the Cooper Webb school of thought, if you'd like, I guess, but this is exactly why he was overlooked in pre-season, because he's not flashy, but he is there every week and he is there to pick up the pieces. And Levi Kitchen was so fast in Daytona. Incredibly impressive. Maybe the best I've ever seen him ride. But it's Vialle who's now in championship contention, That's Vialle's strength, just being there. So, I'm crazy or what?
No, you're not crazy. I'm trying to buck the obvious trend at this point.
The obvious trend?
I don't know. Tom's the defending champion, so you think he should defend?
No, that's not obvious. That's not obvious. We're not. That would be obvious if we were talking to a bunch of Formula One fans who have never watched Supercross. Like, come on, give our audience more credit than that.
I just think on paper, though, Tom, stable program, great off season, defending number 1 plate. RJ barely back on the bike before the championship. Anstie, very late in career, switched to U.S. racing and U.S. Supercross. Levi Kitchen, the I don't know. It's just there's a bunch where I look at Tom, like Chance rode 3 days before the season started. Like coming into it, I think on paper you look as like, yes, I know a fan knows that Tom is the flashiest, but I would still think on paper it was like, oh, it was going to be Levi or Tom. And it's just
where was this analysis when we were previewing East then? Because you never said this once.
When did we preview East?
Well, like in this podcast and stuff, you're now claiming that Vialle all along was just obvious title man, and you never
I say
said this.
Obvious because we didn't do 250s.
Well, we've talked about 250s.
We talk about it. We didn't.
Okay, well, just follow up what I just said. You've never mentioned this, and now you're just going, I'm not going to pick Vialle because it's just obvious and we all knew that Vialle. Look at everyone else. We all knew Vialle would be here.
No. It falls into the Cooper category. I'm not saying everyone knew. It's just when you break it down, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. I'm not saying everybody knew it. It's the easy to overlook option as well.
I'm happy to go Max, RJ, Tom, 33% each at this point.
Oh, wow.
Like, I really am.
Weren't you like 80% max after round 1 or something?
No, we've never done percentages. I said that Max should win, and there's no excuse for him to not win. But that doesn't mean favorite. That doesn't mean like gonna win. Should win just means that like what's his excuse? I mean, technically, you could say that Vialle also has that. What's his excuse?
Yeah.
But then I think Vialle's excuse would be I just wasn't the fastest guy, whereas Max has raw speed, so that isn't a excuse for him. But speaking of Max, yeah, just not wasn't there all day. But weirdly, and I said this to him a few times, and I don't know why I think this. I just feel like evidence supports it. Last year, Daytona wasn't good for Max either, and the year before he was second, okay. But I just feel like for whatever reason, Max isn't good at Daytona. And he disagrees, there's no evidence for this, but I just feel like Daytona and Max isn't it at all.
It's not. Well, you know him better than us. You may know him better than himself.
Okay, well, he disagreed. But yeah, 6 points, and now the emphasis for him will be on the fact that has to be his worst race.
So I think we touched on this a little bit before, kind of the balance of the coast. So when we're putting emphasis on this East-West shootout, the riders talked about themselves like But when you look at, let's say, roughly top 3 to 4 for each coast, let's say, kind of perceived top 3 on East, RJ, Tom, and Max, not leaving chances right there as well. Kind of those 3 against Juju, Deegan, Davies, because Jordan's going to be banged up. Like, where do you look at that as a bit of a toss-up, could end up any way, or do you lean very strongly towards one of those 3 one of those average of 3 will be better than the other, East versus West?
Maybe this is recency bias, but I feel like, and this is recency bias, it can't be anything else. I feel like it goes Deegan, 4 East guys, Juju, Davies, and the rest. Like that. I really feel like it's going to shake out that way. Now, I don't know what East guys, I don't but I do feel like if I do, that's kind of where my head's at entering the showdown.
It is interesting with Dean having, more East Coast Supercross racing experience compared to like Juju, and then Cole does play a little bit more into, especially where the West guys are coming straight out of a bunch of decently hard pack rounds right into Indy. That'll be a nice little toss up for them.
But we need to talk about RJ, the winner, because we actually haven't done that somehow. RJ oozes confidence to me at the moment. Talking to him, he seems very certain, I don't know, just really seems like someone who knows where he's heading and what his plan is. I don't really know how you define that, but there is certainly an aura around him. We know how fast RJ can be if he keeps it upright. Certainly scary for the people who are looking at him as a championship threat. We knew RJ would get one. I guess there's not really that much to say. It's not surprise. It's not shocking. And RJ will win again. Will he win this title? We'll see.
Yeah, I think the big one is just list him. He knows, of course, he's a man that is, this is the end of his 250 career. Literally this championship run right here before he goes 450 outdoors. And like you said, there's just kind of a confidence about them where he just states like he knows how he wants to finish out this chapter of his career.
I said 33% for each, but who would you pick as your favorite?
This would be a lot easier after the first East-West shootout.
Well, speaking of that, Max has been fairly consistent out of the gate. Vialle hasn't.
Yeah.
But I still give him the benefit of a doubt because we know what a great starter he can be, so I just presume.
Yeah. I was going to say something. I just go with experience, consistency on start. Like I said, Max's weekend was just so weird with the crashes. Max is still, if I had to give you a favorite out of those 3, it's Max. And I don't sit at a 33, 33, 33. I sit at a nod to Max regardless.
Hammaker showed up. I feel like Max and Daytona don't work. I feel like Hammaker and Daytona work brilliantly. He mentioned a lot about just working on mindset and making sure that he's in a good place to go racing, working on technique. There was just a lot of information about what he's done to be better. And I think we are seeing that because although the results don't stand out, he was sick in Detroit and got like 17th or something terrible. Actually, under the radar, the riding has been really quite good thus far. I'd almost argue that his results really don't do him justice and more so than any other rider in the field.
I was really high on him after Tampa because even the result we see here, just watching him in qualifying, watching technique, talking to him, I still by far don't think we've seen the best of him, even though the performance at Daytona was good. We still haven't seen the best of Seth this year.
Speaking of insight, we just published a Chance Hymas interview on YouTube, and there was some really interesting stuff about just the fact that the Lawrence brothers' impact on the 250 development has now kind of expired because obviously we're a year and a half gone from that period. So now it's all a bike built around him and the challenges that come with that and the feeling he's got. I can't remember what he said exactly, but basically he had prior to the season, he had one issue and one positive, and somehow he's overcorrected that, and now the positive is the issue, and the issue is the positive. But it's quite revealing. I feel like rare for a rider to be that forthcoming. So I'd recommend everyone gives that a watch. And kind of further to the championship discussion, Hymas turning up with essentially zero prep is proving to be the best decision ever. And you know what? Right now, if you tell me Hymas wins this championship, I don't know if I'm completely shocked. Maybe I raise an eyebrow, but I'm not falling off my chair.
Anything is possible in 2025. Especially if 250 class, like literally anything can happen. It's just a grenade waiting to go off.
Maximus Voland was 5th, but got penalised a couple of championship points for failing sound, which is a bummer, but kind of continues a trend of luckless bike issues for Max Voland. But 5th was much better.
Yeah, they completely gutted the way his whole clutch operates now. He was on a cable clutch with a weird rear brake system on top of it. They basically built a completely custom unit. They've switched. He's been on basically a different clutch and brake combo every single race this year, and he was on another one this weekend. So now he's on a hydro clutch with a completely custom hydro brake unit that sits on top of it that's a lot cleaner than what he had before. But it sounded like coming into this round, they thought they finally had their clutch issue behind them. It's kind of a weird one. It's kind of a weird one. They want to dance around because they're a Hinson sponsor team, but they had a Recluse auto clutch in it before, back when he was still learning how to use the rear brake, and that was the issue. And they've said they think they've figured out the clutch, but I don't know what that exactly means, what components are on at this point.
And speaking of technical components and all of that good stuff, let me thank our sponsor, Yoshimura, for being on board the podcast, like another new sponsor for this year. And I was watching MXGP earlier, and they were interviewing HRC technical director Roger Shenton, a man who's very knowledgeable, been around forever, far beyond my time. And he specifically gave Yoshimura a lot of credit for the work that they've had to do to meet the new noise restrictions and how they've been working closely with Yoshimura. And thank you to Yoshimura and what a great job they're doing. So it just gives you an idea of the forward thinking and the knowledge that's packed into the Yoshimura business, but also the exhaust that you can buy at yoshimura-rd.com to see what they have to offer. A lot on that website as well. So dive in, and thank you to them for supporting this podcast. And who knows? Maybe they have a championship with Chance Hymas in a couple of weeks. I guess we'll have to stay tuned to find out. Jumping down the list a little bit, Daxton Bennick, after a pretty severe concussion, to finish 7th, impressive. Nate Thrasher, after having surgery on his finger 13 days ago and not riding prior to Daytona, 8th, impressive. Cullen Park was 10th, but got bumped up because of Carson Mumford's penalty. In fact, I think Mumford finished 7th, so that would mean Bennick and Thrasher got bumped up as well. But nonetheless, great rides by all. Mumford got bumped up because when Max crashed in the second corner of the main event, he had two choices: either run over Max or go off the track. And he went off the track. He says that he went slow enough, raised his hand, all of that good stuff. The AMA disagrees, and therefore he got penalised. Isn't very happy about it, nor is the Quadlock Honda team. And honestly, who knows? I haven't even seen the footage, and I'd have to watch it myself to give an expert opinion. So stay tuned, and we'll revisit that at some point. I guess there's 2 more points to talk about with 250s. Austin Faulkner qualified a season best 7th in the timed practice. That's great. He started on the cusp of the top 10, somehow bent his front brake lever in the first corner without crashing.
That's extremely... Wait, front brake lever, not rear?
No, front.
Wow, that's extremely unusual.
But persevered, was 9th, I think, when the red flag got thrown. And then it all went pear-shaped. Crashed in the first corner of the restart, and then crashed further that lap in the sand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he slid out in the first turn, and then I looked up, and he was just laying in the sand by himself less than a half a lap later.
And Austin Faulkner, 17th and 14th in the championship. So actually, I wanted to ask you this. Do we just give him the benefit of the doubt, and as long as he finishes the season, we're happy? Like, do we get to the end of the year and say he finishes 12th in the championship? Do we have to just kind of park all criticism and go, well done for getting there?
I don't know. It's because I was, like a few of us, I mean, my preseason conversation was, this is great for Triumph because Austin's at PC, wins one race for the year or two and doesn't win the title, and it's kind of a failure for what's expected, even with the surgeries and the comeback and everything. It's like Triumph, he'll get a win for him, potentially the first. Jordan already did it, though. They'll be great PR no matter what else happens.
They are Triumph are frustrated with him.
I can imagine so. I know I'm very curious, of course, what ends up happening with the second bike for that coast, because originally the conversation was let's get through the first 2 or 3 and see where Austin's at based on the way it's trending. I imagine that maybe Linville will get that nod quicker than we expect.
I think that's off. Linville said, well, from what I gather, not talking to Linville, he didn't do well enough in Detroit, and I spoke to Linville after the race about it, and he said that it's essentially not happening. So,
ugh, damn.
Linville also dislocated his finger in the main event, hence his DNF. And then, not a DNF, but a DNS. Cameron McAdoo didn't start the main event. He crashed on the last lap, not last corner, last jump, I guess, of the heat race. And I would presume he is going to go under the knife sooner rather than later, because he posted on Instagram about missing the main event, but didn't exactly give great detail, which kind of sends a message that it's just like time to admit defeat.
And Cowie's PR was a little bit more worded as basically, to put it bluntly, not a bad way, but it sounded like Mitch basically benched him, made the call like you're getting things fixed, which after what happened at the first East round, on the second one, that was on the conversation point after his red flag incident, that, hey, at this point, the knee's not holding up great, might as well get done. I think Mitch's comment was even after the heat race, I guess he had a pretty good amount of swelling in it. So it was just, if you're Cameron, you basically have to, if it is going to be a long-term issue, if, some guys can ride through knee injuries depending on what it is. If his is that big of a problem, you got to get it done now, because it's going to put you out there next year, through the rest of this year. If you try to salvage the rest of Supercross, there's nothing left for him in this season in Supercross. It's a little bit pointless. It just puts him farther into the offseason being ready, because Cameron has a contract for next year. Let's be honest, Cameron is a Supercross title contender for them, not as much a pro motocross. So yes, having him fully healthy and ready to go for the 2026 season is what is best for him, his teams, his sponsors, everything. Dude, in general, it's surprising how many more people I run into the pits, and not just like, I've heard this comment for a couple of years, gear guys, media guys, but even other teams, suspension techs, mechanics, team managers, a couple of people I've run into there are just like, it's the PC curse thing. People are just like, what is going on? Is it bike setup? Is it direction? Like, what the heck? It's getting to the point it doesn't. Look, it's dirt bikes, guys get hurt, but do we need to have an exorcism for the team? Do we need to bring a Catholic priest to bless the rig? I'm worried about Mitch rolling himself out into traffic. Like, this is insane.
And I don't think we actually clarified earlier that Levi Kitchen broke a collarbone and fractured some. Well, he just said he didn't say vertebrae, but obviously it is, because he just said fractures in his upper back. So he will be out. I mean, that doesn't sound. I feel like an upper back fracture is very rare in this sport.
Yeah, but
but then you're in neck territory, so I guess it's quite dangerous.
Yeah. Garth got the photo sequence, and it is one of the nastiest looking photos I've ever seen. I mean, basically hits sitting, you would almost say sitting down with his legs out. His helmet is basically touching his shin, and the bike is on top of him. It just collapsed him. The way he hit was just absolutely brutal. I do know somebody else that was Chiron's camp. I don't know if it's maybe him just not stating everything or if it checked out better, but I know there was some conversation that night about maybe some little bit of internal injuries as well, but he didn't state anything. So I don't know if that's better than expected or maybe just still kind of clearing up exactly what's going on.
Kind of funny that we're actually ending up in a situation where it is literally Star Yamaha versus Red Bull KTM in every single class.
Hey, how about Star having, after the whole Tampa thing, seeing 3 red plates in Supercross on a bike is decently rare. It happened for HRC. What was 20? Was it 21 that HRC did it with Chase and the Lawrences, or 22?
Would it not have been 23?
Was it 23? Has it been that recent? Anyways, before that though, like, that's been a while. The KTM one was kind of weird though, because Tom carried the red plate, being the title defending champion, into Tampa for the opening round. And now Star carries all three in the same season.
Well, what this tells me is potentially at the end of the year, MotorX could have a trio of number one plates. So we will be on the edge of our seats to find out. MotorX, known for high quality engine oils, also has an entire line of clean, care, and lube products to keep your bike running strong and looking great. Maintenance made easy with race-proven MotorX clean, care, and lube products. And MotorX had great success in MXGP today as well. So thank you to them for their support, as well as Yamaha Motor USA, Yoshimura Decal Works, and Fox Racing. Again, quite an impressive list we have there. Any final thoughts?
This weekend had to be Hardy Muniz's first top 10 overall, right?
I don't know.
Had to be Hardy's first top 10.
I feel like he's been like 13, 14 before, so that isn't far from top 10. I wouldn't surprise me if he snuck one in somewhere.
I'd be very surprised, but still props to him. Especially, I laughed that wall double. I kind of looked all day like, oh, this has got to be doable. And then he finally did it right at the end of practice. And then, of course, it turned into the thing. We go racing, and pretty much a bunch of people just had to hit it first lap and pray.
Yeah. He was 10th at Tampa in 2023, and that was the only one. So one other one. And then, as we said, a lot of 14s and 13s, bizarre amount of 14s and 13s. Any other final thoughts?
No, the only one is, do you have any comment the PC thing? Is it? I mean, you just chalk it up to is what it is, or is there any there's just nothing bearing wise? It just seems baffling to me.
I mean,
it does already.
With all due respect, McAdoo not known.
Oh yeah, no.
McAdoo has a history with injuries. Hammaker has a history with injuries. If anything, it's just, and this will sound incredibly brutal, but if anything, it's just poor rider lineup. Yeah. Because don't get me wrong, every team has an injury-prone guy. They're all over the paddock. This is a very difficult sport, but it seems rare to me to not pair like a McAdoo with a Vialle.
Yeah.
Because again, for all of his faults, and this is now turning into just a Vialle appreciation podcast, but for all of his faults and for all of the shitting on him everyone did pre-season, look at Vialle now. Like there is something to that. There is a skill there. I don't know if you'd call it a skill, but there's a talent and there's a value to it.
Well, it is the uniqueness of take an HRC, a Red Bull, KTM, a one bike per coast program. And yes, there are injuries amongst that group. But still the rarity that, hey, some of these teams that focus on one individual per coast are able to at least get through most of the races, if not all of them. Back when Mitch landed Levi going into last year, that was kind of like, I mentioned, it was to me a big deal because it was, to me, felt like the first victory Mitch had in a few years in terms of the rider market, because the people he had were defaulting greens or, in the case of Cameron, not a rude way, Cameron had a couple different fill-ins, but maybe somebody that wasn't the most sought after factory level guy. But Mitch was also being really cool and showing loyalty to some of these dudes. Levi was the first guy in quite a while that had the gambit of options and chose to go to PC. And I was really hoping that was going to be, the changing of the guard in a sense of okay, people are going to start choosing Michigan, have a little bit more pick of the litter of these level of guys and everything. And I mean, even take their fill-in. Drew made it a race into his car one time. It's just oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is just bad luck, but it just feels like flirting with the edge a little bit, that lineup,
Yeah. No, I agree. When I think of between in its own, but yeah, you take part of that lineup, you take Cameron, Garrett, Seth, and Ty, and it's yeah, these guys are just hurt a ton in general.
And also, it's very important to mention, actually, because we probably should have led this conversation with this. McAdoo got hurt initially with the torn ACL because of a bike problem. So that is also just bad luck. I don't think, to your point, I don't think that's anything on pro circuit because, again, mechanical sport, that happens. But you also just have to throw up your hands and say, well, that's just bad luck. What can you do?
Which of the two Cameron injuries? Are we talking about the first preseason one or the second preseason one?
It's been a lot. It's been a lot.
That's the hard part. They blend together a little bit.
Would you? Well, again, we just kind of talked about the vagueness of Kitchen's prognosis, but I think he would be back for outdoors.
I would hope so. I think the collarbone and just back fracture, as long as there's not, like I said, as long as there's nothing internal going on, I would think he would be back for pro motocross.
Yeah, I would think so.
Hey, you want to take a bet that Drew Adams is on the bike and not Ty Masterpool come Seattle?
Well, again, back to the rider lineup thing. He should be, because it makes zero sense to just keep rolling Masterpool out into Supercross. Like, we know this. Honestly, I've got Vialle. Why did I say Vialle? This is the Vialle podcast. I've got Masterpool's results in front of me for Supercross. That tells me immediately, without doubt, that we should wait for outdoors. That instant.
My other comment is how Mitch probably reacted to seeing him in the club with.
What's your other comment?
Ty basically posting himself just out clubbing and stuff recently. I'm like, that's gonna go over great.
I actually don't think I follow Ty, so
he posts himself out clubbing with somebody. Okay, I'm gonna say this and people are gonna take it the wrong way. One of them was Lucas, but I'm not saying Lucas is the one actually said it was questionable in the post, but there was somebody very questionable in the post outside of that group.
Okay,
probably not a great look.
My final thought is we all have bad days, and my interview sucked all weekend, and I don't know why. I just wasn't there.
No, your press day interviews were good.
No, I hated them. I was really in my head. They were terrible. I don't know why.
Sounds like a personal problem to me. The comments.
Arlington was great, I felt, but no. Pre and post race, my questions were a bit sloppy. My execution was a bit long. I wasn't on, so that's on my mind. So
you're gonna trust the process and come back next week.
Well, that's kind of my point. At the end of the day, for the riders, this is a job, and we all have bad days at our job. And I had one this weekend, and so did a few riders. So we're all going to rebound in Indianapolis, Indiana, this weekend, March the 8th at Lucas Oil Stadium. 450 SX title fight will heat up. 250 SX East-West Showdown, the first of 3 this year. It's going to be great, and we will be back in 7 days to discuss it all. So we will see you then. And also, before we go, sorry about the glitch in the middle. Hope it wasn't too bad. It didn't seem overly bad on my end, but apologies for that. We'll work on that too. Another bad day at the office. They just keep on coming. See you next week.